this whole thing will blow over.
I'm sure that's what Michael Jackson thought. You know, that guy who was brought to court and accused of child molestation. Both times this happened, he was declared not guilty, and he was a walking punchline until the day he died. So, we're really doing this. No, I'm not talking about me or us. At this point, you probably aren't surprised that I'm willing to tackle the more difficult episodes, like Let's Not Be Skeletons, Screams in Silence, Homer Badman, etc. I'm talking about The Simpsons. They're really doing this. Let's just say that The Simpsons has been having quite the interesting few years, which is strange because the show hasn't been interesting in the least in the past few years. I suppose we should start off this controversial review with my most controversial opinion. The Simpsons hasn't been funny or even relevant for just about the entire 2010s. While it can occasionally bang out a good episode like Brick Like Me or Barthood, all too often the episodes just seem to have no flavor, often lacking jokes and resorting to shallow parodies. And yes, I know that the episodes that I just mentioned technically could count as shallow parodies. However, even as it became more and more of a zombie, I originally gave the show credit. When it came to ratings traps, it was usually the normal, respectable kind. It would be like, ooh, ah, this celebrity's appearing in our episode, even though we have celebrities in just about every single episode now. I thought that they'd never do anything like killing off Brian Griffin, or adding a Sparky the dog. Then one day, we all heard that Homer and Marge were going to be getting a divorce, back in the episode Future Drama. For some reason, they thought it'd be a surprise and a shock to air something like that now, even though episodes taking place in the future consistently portray Homer and Marge as having a rough patch in their marriage. Then a documentary called The Problem with Apu aired, taking offense with the character Apu as a stereotypical Indian portrayal. I'm not going to talk about my opinions on this documentary here, as it's not really relevant to this review. What is relevant is how The Simpsons replied. First of all, replying at all in a situation like this is usually a bad idea. Even worse is doing it within the show, where it could be forever immortalized, long after the context is gone. Making matters even worse than that is that they replied to this controversy in an episode that doesn't have Apu. Lisa just says this directly to the episode in the episode No Good Read Goes Unpunished.
It's hard to say. Something that started decades ago and was applauded and inoffensive is now politically incorrect. What can you do?
Some things will be dealt with at a later date.
If at all.
So what they essentially did was built a plot and a message directly at the audience to state that they weren't sorry. Some people will state that in a controversy you should never ever apologize. I don't really align with that point of view. If you're sorry and you think you did something wrong, then by all means apologize. But if you don't think that you're sorry and you've done nothing wrong, not apologizing can be a valid option. However, in that case, the one thing that you should never absolutely ever do is state that you're not sorry in this manner. You know, something that amounts to, I'm sorry that you feel that way. I can go on about the response to this episode, but we need to get moving. After this, rumors circulated that they'd be getting rid of Apu, which is something that even the maker of the documentary did not want. So, The Simpsons basically stated that they weren't sorry about their portrayal of Apu, and when that went awry, then they completely dropped Apu. I think what bothers me the most about this is not that every single character on The Simpsons is a stereotype, and dropping Apu because he was a stereotype among a world of stereotypes is stupid. No. What annoys me the most about this is that The Simpsons used to be a show that could take a stand about something. You know that episode, Homer's Phobia, where Homer learned that it was wrong to be a homophobe, and that gay people were actual people with their own personal lives? That episode actually almost became the first banned episode of The Simpsons, because of the cultural climate at the time. This was a show that wasn't afraid of being politically incorrect if they had a story to tell, or a point to make. It was so controversial, even the president at the time, H.W. Bush, took a shot at it, saying that Americans should be more like the Waltons and less like The Simpsons. These are just some thoughts that I've been having about The Simpsons as a whole. So let's talk about Michael Jackson. In 2019, the documentary Leaving Neverland was released. It focused on two men who alleged that they were sexually abused by Michael Jackson. In response to this, The Simpsons has gone out of its way to remove the episode Stark Raving Dad from airing. Stark Raving Dad, if you don't know, was generally known as the Michael Jackson episode. It's the episode where he guest starred as a major character within the episode. Right now, it's currently unavailable from streaming sites like Amazon Prime, unless you you about it beforehand like I have. Although if you do really want to watch it, it's not that hard to find. This strikes me as a poor move for many reasons. Some points may be stronger than others, but I don't think that I have a particular order. Let's just start with what you might be most concerned about, and that's with the episode itself. Stark Raving Dad has been known and praised as one of The Simpsons' best episodes. It was the premiere episode of season 3, when The Simpsons was really starting to take off as a cultural phenomenon. In this episode, Lisa magically turns 7 for the first half, and asks Bart to get her a present for her birthday party. Meanwhile, Homer ends up locked up in a mental institution because Bart got his shirts dyed pink, and then filled in his psych profile. It was a different cultural time. There he meets Michael Jackson. Actually, he meets a mental patient who claims to be Michael Jackson. And that is a little bit of a side point about this episode. The character in the episode technically isn't Michael Jackson himself. It's a person who believes that he is Michael Jackson, or at least claims to be Michael Jackson. The episode itself contains a very interesting story and is filled with many great jokes.
Simpson, I'm sorry, but your husband suffers from a persecution complex, extreme paranoia, and bladder hostility.
Doctor, if you just talked to him for 5 minutes without mentioning our son Bart, you'd see how sane he is.
You mean there really is a Bart? Good Lord!
Many find it heartwarming as this Michael Jackson character helps Bart write a song for Lisa's birthday, as he forgot to get her one himself, because he got all wrapped up in the Michael Jackson appearance. Talking about the episode itself, though, is not how I want to spend much of this review. It is mostly comedy, and telling you the jokes would spoil it, but I think we need to talk about the overall context that this episode is in, and the idea of banning media created by controversial people, as that is a theme that is coming up more and more in recent years. Before we begin with this discussion, I want to state that The Simpsons was not the only response to Leaving Neverland. Many radio broadcasters stopped playing Jackson's music, for instance, but I think that we should start with the most obvious point that applies to all of these people. The accusations against Michael Jackson are not new. One of the stories of Leaving Neverland was about Michael's first accuser, back in 1993, just a scant 2 years after this episode had first aired. It's now 2019, and 1993 wasn't the only time that Michael was accused. For the entirety of the new millennium, these accusations were intertwined with Michael. You couldn't hear a mention of Michael Jackson without the punchline being related to these accusations, if it wasn't about him no longer being black. This went on for decades, and only stopped when Michael died in 2009. No new information was given to us between July 5th of 2009, when Fox ran the episode to commemorate his death, and the release of this documentary. I understand that a documentary can put old points into new context, and I'm not against people changing their opinions on matters at a later date. That would be absolutely insane to recommend. But let's be absolutely honest with ourselves on this one. You couldn't have gone through the decade prior to Michael's death without at least having some idea of what he was accused with. This wasn't new information, and acting like it was just seems to be capitalizing on a controversy and trying to gather social brownie points. The episode and the Michael songs were allowed to be played all throughout the 2000s without any issue. But, for the sake of argument, let's assume that the allegations against Michael were absolutely true. He's dead. He can't defend himself. We can assume that he was a mutant alien from outer space if we wanted. Even in that case, I still think that it's a mistake to remove this episode from circulation, for a variety of reasons. First is consumer choice. In the past few years, we've heard about plenty of artists and creators who have done absolutely shameful and awful things. However, removing their creations has always struck me as a wrong choice, even ignoring the point that, at this point, we'd have to remove most of what we consume. To give examples, I will have to give names, so be prepared. Hearing about Chris Savino, for instance, changes up the context of a lot of the episodes of The Loud House that he directed, at least for me. I want to do an admirable animation on undie pressure.
Smell him! Smell that cotton! You know you want him!
Oh, you mean that episode where a boy fights for his ability to keep his pants off in a house full of girls? That'll go over very well. Alright. The Tattler's Tale. That's a very good episode. Right, that's the episode where it's shown to be a good thing to keep secrets about others' misdeeds from an authority figure. I want to state that with these particular episodes, these are my own personal hang-ups. And just because Chris Savino has done these things, I still think that they shouldn't be prevented from airing. I think that anyone who wants to watch them should be able to. What I think about them are largely my own hang-ups. There is merit to these stories without the creepy undertones, and you shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. On top of that, entertainment is rarely a one-person show. John Lasseter allegedly sexually harassed many of his employees. Even with this information, I wouldn't want the movies that he directed out of print. And that's not just because they're good movies. It's because they were made by a lot of good and creative people who worked hard through adversity. What would you be saying if you banned the work of his victims? We have to remember this. Just as good people can make terrible art, terrible people can make good art. By removing creations made by terrible people, that makes that fact easier and easier to forget, and it's one that we absolutely cannot afford to forget. This is a bigger problem than you might realize. People often become infatuated with celebrities. They end up more willing to do things for their idols than they probably should be, leaving them in a very vulnerable state. Do you really want to create such an environment where it seems that the only people who can create beautiful art must have beautiful souls? No, we need to know that people like Michael could create music so great that he was called the king of pop. We need to know that people like John Lasseter could be so creative that they can make stories that become a part of many people's childhoods. We need to know that people like Chris Savino can create outstanding characters and create a show that rivals SpongeBob's popularity. I want to make no understatement. Even if Michael was guilty of everything, for a long time, Michael was seen as the biggest thing in the world. To abandon this idea is to paint the world in black and white strokes the world simply isn't. In the early 90s, Michael dominated. In the episode, you could see just a hint of his fame as everyone in town is extremely excited just to get a chance to see him. Just some of his achievements were helping on the soundtrack of Sonic 3, this episode here, which was given the strongest Simpsons story since Lisa's Substitute, and he also wrote Do the Bartman. The Simpsons worked with Michael more than once, and removing this episode from circulation seems less like protecting the innocent, and more like trying to hide the fact that they worked with Michael at all. Michael Jackson was one of the most influential pop artists of not just his time, but of all time. What he did or didn't do will not change that fact. And because of The Simpsons' choice here, they dug themselves into a really bad hole that they probably don't want to be in. The Simpsons has at least 2 Wikipedia pages for guest stars. Do you think that every single one of these people is an exemplary person and will continue to be for their entire lives? I can guarantee you that a lot of these people have already done shitty things. Hell, John Kricfalusi did a couch gag for them. Recent allegations have surfaced against him. And when you know the story, the victim thought that, well, because he was such a creative mind and helped create a part of her childhood, she idolized him. And John Kay took advantage of that. When it comes to situations like this, I find episodes like Stark Raving Dad, The Crows from Dumbo, The Racist Looney Tunes are pieces of history, and to remove them is exactly the same as book burning. Media is the best way to see the context of certain ideas at a certain point of time. Warner Bros. Says it best on the messages they play before showcasing cartoons that are insensitive from a modern standpoint. The cartoons that you are about to see are products of their time. They may depict some of the ethnic and racial prejudices that were commonplace in American society. These depictions were wrong then and are wrong today. While the following does not represent the Warner Bros. View of today's society, these cartoons are being presented as they were originally created, because to do otherwise would be the same thing as claiming that these prejudices never existed, and that is admirable. If Michael was guilty of anything or everything, removing episodes like this from circulation grants the idea that someone so horrendous could never be that well loved or talented. It would be the same as claiming that you, The Simpsons, have never worked with Michael Jackson. And that's not even entertaining the possibility that Michael was innocent. Something that The Simpsons once made an episode about. Don't lose your head over accusations. But go ahead, Simpsons, keep removing your past. At this point, it's the only thing that people like you for. See where this road leads.